The afternoon light filtered through as janela sujas of my small apartment always seemed familiar, yellow, medio opaco, pushing suave against the faded curtains. I had lived nessa casa por 26 años, mostly alone these days, but that never stopped me from keeping the cuarto of my son, Victor, arrumado, as if he might walk through the door at any moment and drop his mochila on the same old bed. Most days I woke up with the alarm of my borrowed phone, a modelo antiguo, com tela rachada, but I never replaced it. Instead, it's like I had gotten used to things funcionarim, so per la metade, na sala, only a faded sofa, and a table with one chair. Survived the last time we needed money. I sold the TV, the mixer, a few rings, always to help Victor or pagar alguma conta atrasada. When I boil coffee in the morning, it's on the old, noisy fogão, which sometimes stinks of gas nearly empty. A thin layer of dust covers almost everything, but I wipe it off every week. Old habito that stays, even when there's no one else to notice. I could still work if I wanted. I used to be a nurse, a good one, back when I wore the uniform with pride. But I gave up the job duro at the hospital when Victor was 12 and Dad had his second stroke. For nearly 6 years, I split my time between cleaning houses and taking care of Dad, changing bed sheets, feeding him, organizing his medicines. When Dad passed, Victor was in college, lost and sad, and I remember thinking, at least agora eu posso respirar. But in truth, no respiré. Instead, I took a job in a supermarket near home and started sewing for vizinhas, anything to keep a little cash coming. I worked many nights for Victor's monthly bus ticket, for his school supplies, often giving up inéditos sueños of returning to estudo, or even a second marriage after my divorce. I declined 3 marriage proposals in my life. One from Elias, the butcher, unassuming and kind. He offered stability, but I refused because I thought Victor needed all my patience and energy. I opened Monde de Peace and Companionship because Victor had too much trouble dealing with the breakup with his father. Another time, when I got an offer to manage a friend's medical clinic, I said, no, obrigada, because it would mean long hours away from home, leaving Victor alone at night, something I feared after he almost choked on a piece of bread while I was at work. Sometimes at night, when the apartment is very quiet, the cold tiles under my feet, I ask myself where I might be if I had said yes to any of those chances. To be honest, I grew up hearing that women exist to dar, and I normalized my own exhaustion. If there was a problem, I solved it. Returning a library book Victor forgot, paying late fees, missing my own doctor's appointment because I thought his growing pains mattered mais do que minha dor no peito. The word desistir became my shape, giving up the money I scraped together that year for new shoes when Victor wanted a video game for his birthday, canceling a rare chance of an outing with amigas because Victor was not feeling well. I cut my own hair in the kitchen to save money and thought, nobody repara a mim mesmo. I see myself as a silhouette moving quietly between needs, hardly solid. Outsiders, they look at me and see only the persistence mother, always present, never late, but slightly faded, como se eu fosse só uma figura de fundo. Sometimes they say, you're so generous, or Victor is lucky, but I'm not sure if I ever believed that. In my head, I am just tired, and I keep hoping maybe tomorrow will be less pesado, that I can finally go to the park not worrying about bringing money for juice in case Victor asks for it. As I wash the dishes, the rough sponge on my hands, I remember 2 flashes from other times that seem both far and recent. The first was the Christmas when I sold the last gold ring my mother had given me to buy Victor a bike. That night, I pretended the absence of gifts for myself didn't burn, but as he rode in circles, joy pouring out of him, I felt a mix of loss and satisfaction. The second was quieter, a memory of sitting in an empty hospital corridor waiting for the doctor, knowing heart palpitations might be something serious, but too afraid to spend on exams. Money Victor needed for a field trip, that long bench, the hum of the vending machine, the deep, hollow fear. I pushed it aside, went home without answers. Now the walls in my home bear a bit of peeling paint, and the old refrigerator always almost empty. I keep my documents in a biscuit tin under the sink, near expired bills and proof of bank loans. Financially, I am, as always, on the edge, depended on Victor's part-time jobs, sometimes on charity baskets from the church, and often on miracles of making ends meet that only a tired mother understands. To everyone, my neighbors, my cousins, I am the reliable Dona Clara, always fine, never complains. But behind my closed eyes each night I see the cracks, my loneliness, the need for Algem asking if I slept well, the ache for a birthday without having to bake my own cake. What I neglect most in myself is simple: comfort, recognition, descanso, and especially the right to want anything so para mí. I move slowly through these rooms, the floor cold, the kitchen flickering with the weak overhead bulb, breathing in the faint scent of old coffee. Even now I fold Victor's clothes and stack them in his drawer. Shirts from school, a faded towel he once used. My body is tired, my hands cracked from cleaning, but I tell myself, tomorrow it might get easier. For now I just keep going. The living room had been transformed for the occasion. Paper lanterns swinging over the heavy old furniture, a mix of decades swirling in the bright white lights, strung across the ceiling. My son's birthday. He had just turned 30, a grown man in his pressed shirt, and that careful, distant smile he wore whenever people from his new life met people from the old. The air was thick with perfume, cologne, and the sharp scent of cleaning product I'd used that morning to hide years of dust from under the baseboards. Guests filled every seat they could find, some chatting, others standing clustered with glasses balanced on their palms. Some of them had been coming here since my son was a boy. Others were his new circle, people from the firm, young and laughing too loudly at inside jokes. I watched it all from the kitchen threshold, my hands red and pruny from the dishes, shoulders tense and aching from hours at the stove. Little clusters formed and parted, laughter rising and falling in gusts, songs skipping on the radio. "Where's the napkins?" someone called from the dining table. "Check near the oven, by the cutlery," replied a voice, a friend of my son's, without even glancing in my direction. They moved past me, grabbing napkins, not pausing as I shifted aside, nearly pressed to the fridge. A plate slipped from someone's hand and clattered, scattering appetizers across the polished wood floor. "Oh, geez," muttered a guest. I moved reflexively, cloth already in hand, crouched on the floor before anyone had to step around the mess. My knees popped, the tile cold through my skirt. Smeared cheese and crackers clung to my fingers. Someone laughed. "Don't worry, the house manager's got it." My son's girlfriend gave my shoulder a gentle pat, as if reassuring an old pet, then drifted back to her conversation. The scents of wine, roasted meat, sweetened cake, sweat, and floor cleaner fought under the bright lights. My clothes felt tight and sticky under my arms. Even the gold bracelet my late mother had given me years ago seemed too heavy, so I kept turning it nervously. When I got up to throw away the napkin, I almost bumped into my son. He didn't notice, wrapped in talk about his latest deal, eyes bright and body loose, as he leaned into laughter he'd learned with strangers. A loud toast called for attention. Someone tapped a fork against a glass. All eyes turned to my son at the center. "I just want to thank you all for being here," he began, voice ringing clear as he singled out friends and mentors for praise. "And, of course, to Laura for dealing with my long hours. Wouldn't be here without you." Applause burst out. My name evaporated in the heat of the lights and chatter. I caught myself nodding, silently clapping along. I took a shaky breath and suddenly my heart pounded. I tried to sit, but a jacket had been tossed over my usual chair, so I stood, pretending to look for something in the sideboard instead. My legs trembled. I stared at a tray of canapes I'd made. No one had touched them, and let my fingers curl tight around the silver edges. As people filed to the dessert table, someone called into the kitchen. "Hey, don't forget Laura's gluten-free cake." I flinched. The cake I'd made for my own son shelved to the back, untouched. The oven was still warm from heating everyone's preferences. My back hurt, feet throbbed, but no one noticed as I slipped back behind the service counter to fetch plates. I caught my husband's voice booming. "She always keeps things running at home." He grinned widely, but to his friend, not to me. "Doesn't she, son?" My son smiled absently. Wouldn't know what to do without her, but his eyes barely brushed me, already flicking away to someone else's raised glass. Later in the kitchen, I scraped plates and rinsed cutlery. The smell of lemon soap mixed with old wine. The hum of the party was muffled by the wall, but I still heard the laughter spike now and then, the easy, belonging kind. My face burned hot even though the window was open, cold air stinging my cheeks. I pressed my damp hand to my forehead, remembering my son leaning against my shoulder as a boy. How proud he'd been when I came to pick him up at school. A memory surfaced of his first medal, clutched in his small hand as he pointed. That's my mom. Now I was barely a shadow at the edge of his world. A cousin wandered in for a refill, pausing when she caught sight of me. She offered an awkward half-smile, not quite meeting my eyes, then hurried out as if afraid I might trap her in my chores. The final straw came just as most guests were departing. My son returned, coat on, and called back to the kitchen. "Mom, Laura wants some of the salmon to take home. Can you wrap it up?" He barely turned, just waved a hand, voice casual as if ordering a coffee. The last of the laughter faded as doors closed and shoes shuffled out of the hall. At midnight, alone at the table, I wiped the final water ring from the wood, all the noise and color gone. There was a cold nausea in my stomach, a hot pressure at my eyes, my entire body feeling as small and invisible as the crumbs swept into my palm. The house was quiet, but for the ticking of the old wall clock, I pressed my hand against my chest as if to hold myself together and tried to recall the last time someone had truly seen me. I leave the party with my hands shaking slightly, my mind replaying everything that just happened. The laughter and music still echo in my ears as I walk, but the cold night air is sharp against my face, anchoring me back to my own body. I breathe in deeply. The heaviness in my chest is slowly replaced by something else, something that is not quite anger, but not resignation either. It's clarity. Outside, I hesitate for a moment, staring at the pavement under the streetlight, an oily patch glistening. I realize that for years I have walked on eggshells, without even noticing the cracks in my feet. As I move homeward, my steps grow more certain. I clutch my purse tightly, feeling the softness of the worn leather, a reminder of all the years I clung to what was safe and predictable. That bag has split seams from being overstuffed, patched by my own hands again and again, always mending instead of replacing. I think of how similar I am to it, always holding too much, never emptying, always fixing, never discarding. I see it all so clearly now, the pattern stretched across decades like a faded runner rug. I gave up my teaching career for Paolo and the girls, thinking I'd return when they were bigger. The years unfolded and returning never was an option. There was always someone who needed me more. Then when mine got sick, I worked extra nights at the bakery, eyes burning from lost sleep, telling myself this was just love in action. I pressed my own wishes down until I couldn't even name them anymore. At the party, it struck me with a raw sharpness how invisible I had become to my own family, their faces surfacing in my mind, the polite but distracted smiles, the interruptions whenever I tried to speak, the easy way they left me at the edge of the room, as if I was a piece of old furniture, comfortable enough to lean on, never worth moving to the center. The memory of Anna turning away from me at the cake table flashes as a cruel snapshot. I feel it burning in my chest. I see now that my own silence fed this disregard. The needs I never claimed became invisible even to myself. The apartment door is rough and splintered, the paint peeling in the corners just like the hands that open it each night. I always thought the smallness of this place reflected our financial struggle, but tonight, it feels like the cramped physical shape of my life. Inside, I walk straight to the mirror in the hallway. The golden frame is smudged and cracked at the bottom, a relic from my wedding. I stare at my own eyes, get lost in the tired but steady gaze looking back. I see the tracks of old tears, wrinkle lines formed by years of frowning and worrying. But beneath it, there is something else. A glimmer, a stubborn pulse wanting to emerge. My mind drifts back to moments I now see differently, like that time Paolo dismissed my attempt to suggest a family holiday, asking instead if I could sew the rip in his trousers before it gets worse. Or the day Anna snapped at me about her school project running late, never once asking about my day, though I drove across the city to get fresh supplies for her art. Anguish stirs inside me, but I refuse to let it turn into self-pity. A new heat, a flush of resolve, runs up my neck instead. I sit quietly in the living room for a long stretch, holding the old patched purse in my lap, fingers tracing the seams. All the voices, my mother's advice, Paolo's requests, the girls' complaints, rise up like a chorus. But beneath them is the steady thrum of my own breathing, louder now, reminding me I am still here. I tell myself quietly, you are not less because you say no. You are not selfish for wanting more. The room is silent except for the low buzz of the fridge cycling on and humming off. I decide, right then, that I will not wash the dishes left for me tonight. I will not answer the next late message asking if I could just do one more thing. My night will be mine, even if it is only these few hours. This thought is embarrassingly small, and yet exhilarating, a taste of freedom that shudders through me so hard. My lips tremble into an unintended smile. This is not an explosion, not even a rebellion. It is a single, unmoving refusal, heavy and solid as rock. I will begin as quietly as I have always lived, but I will begin. As I stand to close the curtains, feeling the thin fabric between my fingers, I sense the truth. Change does not always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it is a door swinging shut on what you can no longer carry. The cold air of the evening seeps in through a crack in the kitchen window as I sit at the table, the only light coming from the weak bulb overhead. My hands are steady, the cup of tea before me untouched, steam swirling lazily, warming my face. There is something ceremonial in the way I let the silence settle. For the first time in years, I do not call out into the house to check if someone needs anything. I live alone now, not by choice, but by consequence, and just for tonight. That feels like secret relief. Stacks of old papers sit on the table. Bills, bank statements, emails printed out at the request of others, forms for Anna's college, Vinicius's endless installments, reminders of debts repaid and debts forgiven. Each one is a little stone I have carried in pockets and tucked into my conscience. 3 decades, maybe more, of keeping everyone's life running, everyone's dreams polished, at the expense of everything that once belonged to me. I start with my calendar. I begin deleting repeating events. Pagar conta de Ana. Ligar para plano de saúde do pai. Aniversário do Vinícius. Comprar presente. Antecipado porque ele esquece. Each tap, each delete, is lighter than I expect. My chest feels both hollow and wide, as if each erasure makes more room for breath. I archive messages where I apologized for not being able to help more, where I explained myself for saying no, on the rare occasion I remembered how. I leave only what is mine, reminders of books I want to read, a recipe saved, a notification to water the plant on the window ledge, nearly forgotten. I go to the hall closet. I reach for the old box labeled Urgente. It always was, the family emergency kit, the folder with all the main cards, documents, passcodes, the phone list stuck with yellowing tape on the lid. For years I've guarded this like a sacred object. Tonight I decide to hand it back, not in anger, but as someone setting down a heavy sack in the middle of a road. I take out every document that isn't mine, each card, each binder with someone else's name. I arrange them on the kitchen table with slow thoroughness, order out of chaos, as if this too is a way of reclaiming space. Through the open window, distant city noise filters in, a motorcycle whining, glass bottles clinking, footsteps from the neighbor upstairs. I hear them, but the usual irritation is gone, replaced by curiosity. How long has it been since I noticed what was outside my own circle of worries? I draft a letter, nothing flowery, just lines written with the clarity of being truly awake. I explain directly what I am returning, what I will no longer manage, that from this night, each must care for their own passwords, bills, their own messes and recoveries, sincerely without thunder or drama. I print 1 copy for each, seal them in envelopes, and as I write the names, I feel the old guilt surface, burrowing quietly. I see Anna as a child, clinging to my skirt, begging me to never leave her alone at the entrance of the school. Vinicius at 16, sullen and silent after his father left, needing rides and reminders and reassurance. Part of me is afraid. What if I have taught them only to depend? I put the cards, keys, and envelopes in the largest shopping bag I own and carry it to Anna's apartment, 4 blocks away. The city air is cool, and everything feels fragile, as if the universe might change shape if I walk loudly. I let myself in, as usual. My key still opens the door. leaving the bag on the kitchen counter where she'll see it first. I don't linger. I take the stairs down instead of the elevator, wanting to feel my body move, solid on each step. At home again, I repeat the process for Vinicius and for my sister. Documents into neat files, bags left at doorsteps, written explanations under their names. There are no tears, no confrontations, only the resolution that has replaced the old trembling. As the night creeps in, I throw away the copied family key that used to hang on the hook next to mine. No one calls. Not yet. I expect disbelief, maybe outrage. But in these first hours, nothing happens. I sit on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, room lit by the soft orange lamp that's always been just mine. The house is almost echoing now, emptier and also cradling me instead of weighing down. A small sharp fear stabs. What if I've gone too far? What if they truly never ask me for help again? But I look at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser, and for the first time in years, the woman looking back seems more than the sum of everyone else's emergencies. Tonight, this action, plain, reasonable, barely noticed by the world, is everything. A symbol. The bag left at Anna's kitchen. The envelopes at the doors. They represent my new promise. I will not disappear into other people's needs anymore. As sleep comes slowly, my last thought is quiet pride. I have started. There's no going back to invisibility. The quiet is no longer emptiness. It's the first taste of air after surfacing from deep water. The phone started ringing early the next morning, each buzz slicing through the quiet of my small apartment like a knife. I let it ring. First, it was Andre, my son, the one for Quem I had worked all those extra shifts and who just yesterday looked at me as if I were a stranger while snatching the keys from my hand. His calls came 3 times before lunchtime. No messages. Just missed calls piling up and filling my screen like little accusations. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands flat against the surface, feeling the grain of the old wood, focusing on the uneven ridges rather than the insistent buzzing. An afternoon passed before the first message came. Long winding paragraphs from Andre. Maya, why are you doing this? It's not like you. You know how much we need you. Are you really giving up like this? Guilt poked at me in familiar tender spots. My chest, my throat, the hollow of my ribs. I almost replied. Instead, I turned the phone face down and went about making a simple lunch, letting the rhythmic chopping and sizzling drown out the storm of his words. By evening, it was Sandra, my sister, who tried. She prefers voice notes. Lucia, you can't just abandon us. I know things are tough, but think about the family. Think about everything you sacrificed. It can't be for nothing. Eles dependem de você. Don't do something you'll regret. I could hear her pacing in her kitchen, the clatter of dishes in the background, her tone soft under layers of forced patience, pressed hard against my resolve. I went to the window. The glass was cool. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent and noisy. When I failed to answer, Sandra sent a final message. At least talk to Andre. He's in pieces here. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I set the phone down again. The next day, I spotted Andre's car parked across the street. When I returned from the market, he didn't come up or knock. He left a note at my door instead. This is ridiculous, Mun. You need to snap out of it. We're a family. We look out for each other. The paper trembled in my hand. The words were sharp, impatient, as if I were a naughty child rather than his mother, the one who taught him to read, to cook rice, without burning the bottom of the pan. I drew a bath and let the water run too hot, watching steam curl along the tile, lying there, heart pounding against the porcelain. I wondered if I should just apologize, smooth everything over. The old urge returned. Make peace. Make yourself small. Disappear into confession and forgiveness. But then I thought of that moment last night, the padlock clicking shut behind me, how the heaviness I always carried had shifted, just enough for me to breathe again. The days blurred together, filled with small silences only broken by the shrill tones of the phone, messages, and sometimes the quick shadow of someone outside my door. No one offered understanding, just demands, accusations, and reminders of what I owed. Sandra tried again, this time arriving in person. Lucia, think about your grandson. He needs you. Andre's lost his mind. Can't you see that you're hurting everyone? Her eyes were wet, but her arms folded tightly, barring any vulnerability from spilling out. I stood in my own hallway and told her, voice steady, I can't give what I don't have. The words hung in the air, heavy and strange between us. Sandra's disbelief flickered into something bordering on anger. "So that's it? Throw away a lifetime for some tantrum?" She left before I could answer, her perfume lingering long after the door had closed. That night I tried to read but realized I'd stared at the same page for half an hour, not taking in a word. I wanted someone, just one person, to say, "I see why you did it." But they all wanted me back the way I was, generous, exhausted, endlessly available. The isolation felt brittle, painful, like standing barefoot on cold tile. I began to do little things for myself, rearranged the shelf of mugs so my favorite was in easy reach, instead of always at the back. Went to the market alone, bought a small bag of pecans just because I liked them, not because someone else expected pie. At first, each act felt rebellious, silly, but then a kind of quiet satisfaction followed, a seed of independence pushing through the cracks of my routine. More calls, more messages. Andre's tone shifted from anger to desperation. "My, please, you can't mean this. We miss you. Just come back. We'll talk. I won't raise my voice." There was tenderness there, but I recognized it now as manipulation dressed in affection. I waited. I let the hours tick by. By the end of the week, there was a knock. Not the hurried, practiced knock of family, but a hesitant, gentle tap. Donna Nilda from the 3rd floor. She asked if I wanted coffee. We sat together in her tight little kitchen, 2 women surrounded by the smell of strong coffee and honey bread. She said nothing about Andre or Sandra, or my so-called stubbornness. She only said, "Você está bem, Lucia?" I nodded, and for a moment the tension dissolved. Later, alone again, I felt the faint ache of loneliness return. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was clear, open, holding the possibility of something new. The others kept trying. Sandra left a bag of groceries at my door. The good kind of rice, the expensive beans. I put them away, but didn't call her back. 3 more times Andre tried to get in. Through gifts, through guilt. Once through the building manager asking if everything was all right with Donna Lucia. Each time I said the same thing. "I'm resting. I'm not ready. I need time." They didn't like this new version of me. The one that answered but didn't acquiesce. Who listened but didn't absorb. I felt exposed but steady. On Sunday, Sandra returned. No groceries, no soft voice. Only anger now. "You think you're the only one who's tired? You think I never sacrificed? This isn't you. You're sick, Lucia. Let us help you." The old ally, now a suspicious adversary. I recognized the fear in her eyes, a fear that my defiance might be contagious. In the dull calm that followed, I started making boundary lines, small but sure. Phone on silent at night. Meals eaten when I was hungry, not at whatever hour others decreed. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, doubt pressed close, whispering its old comfort. Go back, say you're sorry, disappear into being needed. I would sit, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, and ride out the urge. With each test, each confrontation, something inside me grew firmer. For the first time in decades, I was not the easy arm to lean on. My family circled, tested, retreated, tried again. But I stood, a little shaky, but upright, finally taking the space that had always belonged to me. Days passed in a fog of silence and countless missed calls. Their voices, sharp, urgent, sometimes suddenly pleading, buzzed from the phone's display, but I always let them fade. One afternoon, as rain tapped on the small kitchen window, I opened the old biscuit tin on top of the fridge, searching for nothing in particular. My hands found an envelope yellowed at the edges, thick with the weight of secrets. My name, still clear beneath layers of dust, stared at me in my mother's cursive. I slid out a series of folded letters, some written by my late mother, others addressed to her but never sent, hidden all these years among expired receipts and faded recipe clippings. My heart hammered as I unfolded the first one. The words blurred and sharpened with each trembling breath. In one, dated from the year I decided to surrender my university scholarship to care for my sick father, she wrote, "Anna, there's another way. Please don't give up your dreams for us. Your brother can do more than you think." I read this line again, feeling the sting of every time he let me believe he was helpless, dependent on my constant forgiveness and sacrifice. My mother had seen it all, the uneven load, the silent expectations that became chains. There were descriptions of my brother's lies about illnesses, exaggerations for sympathy, things he'd denied each time I asked. She doubted his stories but told me gently in her letters how much she hoped for my independence. That old story, the one I replayed in my mind, that he needed me, that my absence would wreck the family, crumbled and cracked with each sentence. My mother's explanations were clear. My sacrifices were never truly requested, only taken for granted. My so-called choice was a cage lined with obligations sown by their fears and her own weariness, not out of love, but expectation. Some letters revealed my mother's own guilt, her knowledge that she benefited from my presence at home, easing her loneliness while turning a blind eye to my withering. I felt anger, betrayal, and a surprise, a shimmer of relief flickering through the grief. Clutching the paper, I withdrew to the bedroom, sinking into the yellowed quilt where nights had blurred into years. Through the window, rain flickered against city lights, and I remembered my 20th birthday, my brother grinning as he asked me to make his favorite cake, never sensing my hunger for escape. My mother at the stove, humming nervously, witnessing my trade of an entire future for fleeting family peace. The memory, once nostalgic, now felt like a confession of complicity. My breath quickened. I read and reread her apology, each word burning like salt on an old wound, reminding me that what I lost wasn't stolen overnight, but surrendered piece by piece, encouraged by silence. I walked to the narrow hallway, the floor creaking beneath memories. In the mirror, I saw the lines of worry on my face and held the letter to my chest. The ache was raw, but not paralyzing anymore. They never deserved my martyrdom, not my brother, not even my late mother. With trembling hands, I set the bundle of letters atop my freshly packed suitcase, the last of many small acts preparing me for something new. I stood in silence for a long time, remembering years spent forfeiting needs for an affection that was always conditional. I could almost hear my mother's voice from the page. "You were always stronger than you knew." Those words, meant so long ago as comfort, felt now like a key, one I finally wanted to turn. As the sky cleared after rain and stray rays of sunlight flickered over the floor, I accepted the fullness of this truth. What I was given, what was withheld, and what could never be reclaimed. The pain pressed close, but beneath it, space was opening inside me, a breathing room for beginnings. I folded the final letter and placed it at the bottom of my bag, a thought crystallizing. I would keep the lesson, not the burden. The truth now revealed belonged to me. Not as a scar, but a compass. Now I needed only one more step, out of their old story, into whatever story I would finally write for myself. I woke up that morning feeling all the weight in my chest, but something new pulsated too, a sharp current of clarity. I sat at the edge of my bed with the envelope in my hands, its edges worn from the endless hours I'd spent turning and reverando it between my fingers last night. I wore my oldest slippers and walked through the silent apartment. The sun pressed its way through the thin curtains, making dust motes glitter in the living room. I opened the window. Cool air slid across my skin. My breathing was shallow, quick, but focused. The chair scraped the floor, loud in the emptiness. When I drew it out from the dining table, I had called Marzio last night to let him know we needed to talk, cara a cara. His answer was quick, casual, like he didn't catch the gravity in my voice. "Tá, mãe, pode vir aqui. Só não demora muito não, que tenho compromisso." Now standing at his apartment door, I could feel my heart tapping like anxious fingers inside my ribcage. My hand hovered, then knocked. I heard the faint sounds of a TV, a laugh track, something frying, the smells of garlic oil, a hint of stale cigar. The doorknob turned and my son opened the door with beady, cautious eyes. "Entra," he said, barely glancing at me. He wore the same old football shirt from his college days. Faded blue, a knot of annoyance already twisted in his mouth. I came in. The TV was on, volume just loud enough to drown out uncomfortable silence, soap opera voices clashing against each other. I turned it off with the remote. He huffed, exasperated. "Que foi agora, mãe?" I sat, enveloped steady on my thigh. For a moment I just looked at the messy apartment, shoes slung in corners, an empty pizza box on the coffee table. A mug with 3 cigarette butts washed in cold coffee. My voice didn't crack. "We need to talk, Marzio. No è rapido." He slouched into the armchair across from me, picking at his nails, eyes darting to his phone every few seconds. Fala logo. I held the envelope up. You know this? His face shuttered for a split second. Then he shrugged. Não sei. O que que é? The letter your father left. The one you hid from me. My throat burned, but my voice was low, steady. He scoffed, looking away. Isso faz tempo já. Não diz nada que importa, mãe. Você fica presa nessas coisas. I cut him off, voice firmer. Não me menospreze mais, Márcio. Não faça isso nunca mais. There was a pause. The apartment air felt heavy, like it pressed on my skin. He looked at me with a flicker of something. Fear, or maybe just surprise at my tone. Por que você tá assim agora? He asked softly, eyes narrowing. Porque passei a vida toda abaixando a cabeça para todo mundo aqui. I pointed at my chest. Tiraram meus sonhos, meu tempo, minha juventude. Nunca reclamei, nunca pedi nada em troca. Mas hoje acabou. Eu sei o que fizeram comigo. E entendi. Não vou aceitar mais. He gave a weak little laugh, almost nasty. Você sempre fala que faz tudo por mim, mas vive reclamando, mãe. Agora vem com drama de carta antiga. Deixa isso pra lá. I stood up, the legs of the chair scraping. Seu pai mentiu. Você mentiu. Eu construí minha vida em cima dessa mentira. Eu merecia saber. My voice rose, not yelling, but filling the room. A partir de hoje, quem decide o que fica comigo sou eu. He stared, stunned. Você tá exagerando, mãe. Todo mundo mente um pouco. I forced myself to breathe, steady and deep, holding back the tears for clarity's sake. Não, não é um pouco. Isso aqui. I shook the letter. Mudou tudo. Eu não vou mais ser a pessoa invisível nessa família. He got up, crossing his arms. There was anger in his voice now, but it didn't touch me like antes. Então, o que você quer? Vai sair fazendo escândalo? I don't need to make a scene, Márcio. Just to leave. Leave your culpa, your cobranças. Eu vim aqui olhar nos teus olhos e dizer: nada do que vocês jogaram em cima de mim me pertence mais. He exhaled loudly, hands falling from his chest. Tá bom então, mãe. Faz o que quiser. Mas lembra, quando precisar de alguma coisa, não espera que vou ajudar. Tô cansado. I met his gaze, not flinching at the threat. Até isso eu perdi o medo de ouvir. Se precisar, dou um jeito. Eu sempre dei um jeito, não foi? Agora é por mim. For a final time, I looked around the apartment. I felt that tightness in my chest loosen, like the first deep breath after coming up from underwater. He sat and fiddled with his phone, glassy-eyed. I went to the door, my hand pausing on the knob. He said, not quite apologizing, not quite attacking. Se você for mesmo, não espera a volta. I turned, not smiling, not crying, but steady as a stone. Eu só espero respeito. E, enfim, posso dizer, eu me respeito. I walked out. The corridor outside smelled of bleach and old newspapers. Each step back to the elevator was lighter, my pulse slower. I realized in that sharp little pocket of silence that I had finally left something behind that never belonged to me, and I would never pick it up again. The next morning I woke up before dawn. There was a strange quiet in the house, a gentle, expectant silence I hadn't known in years. I got out of bed, stretched my limbs, and felt the cool wooden floor under my bare feet. I listened. No footsteps from above, no TV blaring through thin walls, no voices demanding coffee or clean shirts, just the hum of the refrigerator and a soft chorus of birds waking with the sun. I stood at the window and watched as the first pale rays illuminated the wilted plants on my porch. Maybe, I thought, they could still recover. I went outside, the cold air prickling my skin, but making me feel alive, sharper somehow. I grabbed the small watering can and poured a slow stream over the roots. Each droplet felt purposeful, like tending for the first time to something that was truly mine. Inside, I prepared my own breakfast carefully. A bowl of oatmeal, slices of fresh orange, and strong black coffee. The kitchen smelled like citrus and hope. I set the table with one bright plate and a linen napkin, just for me. As I ate, I heard the phone buzzing in the living room. A number I didn't recognize. Another attempt, maybe, but I let it ring and fade. I was already full of a different kind of energy. After breakfast, I opened the boxes still left from those first days, when I had moved here and thought this place would belong to us, not just to me. I took out old photos and letters, sorting gently, choosing what to keep and what to finally let go. Some I tossed in a paper bag, some I tucked away. I set aside a handful of blank cards, feeling their weight, knowing I might use them to write to people who truly cared, or perhaps even to myself. It was time to clear space. I hauled dusty chairs to the curb and spread a soft rug across the middle of the living room. In the quiet, I knelt and wiped the coffee table clean, tracing the grain of the wood with a wet cloth. The sun now filled the room, casting a warm golden glow on the walls. I flung open the window, letting new air rush in. Later, Marissa, my neighbor, knocked with a basket of bread she'd baked. "Thought you might like this," she smiled. I invited her in. We talked about gardens and little joys, her eyes kind, never once asking about the noise or why some faces no longer visited. We shared slices of bread still warm, butter dripping down our chins. I laughed at a silly story she shared. I noticed I wasn't performing, wasn't shrinking. Before she left, she touched my shoulder. "If you want company or quiet, let me know," she said. I watched her walk away, holding the door open just a second longer for the sunlight. By afternoon, I had set a vase of wildflowers on the dining table. Their colors, red, purple, deep yellow, almost startled me, so different from the grayness I'd accepted as normal. I found an old scarf I loved, wrapped it around my shoulders, and spun slowly in the middle of the room. I felt the fabric fluttering, my own laughter suddenly echoing back. There was still pain inside me, and traces of bitterness, but now they felt like shadows at the edge of a bright day, neither able to overtake me nor to hide what was possible. I understood that healing would come in inches, not in leaps. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked tired, yes, but also clear-eyed at last. By evening I had written a single sentence on a card, just for myself. "I am my own home now." I placed it on the windowsill, where the last of the sun hit the words. Tomorrow I'd plant seeds in the earth along my porch. I'd watch them root and stretch upward just like me, alive again and reaching, at last, for the light.